This week on Crunch Week, we're talking about Foursquare splitting its app into two, Facebook's F8 developer conference, and Twitter stock trading at an all-time low. Welcome to Crunch Week. I'm Colleen.
I'm Josh Constantine.
I'm Anthony Ha.
And we're in New York City right now at the New Yorker Hotel in preparation for Disrupt, which is starting in just a couple days. But now we can talk about everything that happened this past week. First off, Foursquare separating itself into Foursquare and a standalone brand new app that's going to be called Swarm.
So
what do you
it's
think?
8 Square now.
It's 8 Square.
That's great. That's really
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. We've been talking a lot about the unbundling of 2014, but you know, really, you might need to have more users before unbundling makes sense. Like, I get the idea that people want single-purpose mobile apps, but you also need like a critical mass of people using any apps for it to really succeed.
And what, Foursquare has 100 million? I mean, what's the most
I heard it was
recent?
45 million as of December 2013.
Oh, okay.
that sounds closer. Although we'll see, and I guess we'll be really embarrassed whoever was wrong when we write up the story.
What do you think about this separation? I mean, you've used Foursquare in the past.
I have, although it's been longer maybe than I should have been on camera than I've used it. But yeah, no, I think that it seems like something where I guess you can interpret it as like sort of like Facebook, to a certain extent you could argue they're sort of doing it from a position of strength of like they've got this really popular app, but as they look to the future they need to really focus on doing specific things really well with each app. Foursquare, I think to me it feels more like we still haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do to sort of get to the next level. So let's actually have multiple apps to continue sort of experimenting and figuring out what that's going to be.
But in this case, I mean, Foursquare really had to work hard to do this. They had to really rebuild their service from the ground up in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely not probably, especially at a company at the stage that Foursquare is at, where they've raised that much money and been around for that many years. I mean, I think it's definitely not ideal, and they're definitely it's not that they want to continue to sort of experiment. They're really hoping probably at least one of these really kind of takes off from here.
So yeah, so Foursquare's side app Swarm is going to be all about ambient proximity, and Yelp for years didn't allow you to review from mobile. It's kind of crazy that you were sitting at a restaurant and after your meal you couldn't actually talk about it. You had to go home and write a long-form web review, and so I think that created this opportunity. People don't want to read long-form reviews; they want just the nuggets and the highlights. And if Foursquare can really nail that with their core app by splitting off the check-ins into Swarm, that might be successful.
They can. I think that's the ideal use. That's the ideal thing that would happen. I think that's what Foursquare's hoping for.
Right, and I mean, to be clear, I think Yelp now is allowing that, but you're right that they waited a while to do that, and I don't think, when you think of Yelp, you don't think of these sort of bite-sized reviews, you still think of sort of the longer, more in-depth ones, I think.
I don't know, are you banking on this sort of Foursquare pivot to be working out? Would you put your money on it?
It still remains to be seen how people feel about ambient proximity, which is, this, instead of checking in and giving your exact location, saying how far away you are from friends. I mean, I think it's a cool idea, and it's certainly better than the old check-in model, which often was like awkward and wasn't all that useful. But it's still a really different use case for people, and these companies like Facebook with Nearby Friends and Foursquare are really going to have to educate users that this isn't their daddy's check-in.
I agree, and it's so different from what Foursquare started as. I think there's going to be a lot of confusion around this. Now it's Swarm, now it's Foursquare. I thought that was a check-in app, no more badges, no more check-ins, and to really get this out there to the general public after so many years that Foursquare has been known as this one thing, it's really fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, sometimes you have to make those kinds of bets because you feel like, what you were doing before is just not going to get you to where you need to be as a business, but that to sort of cut loose from that and try to build something like a new identity, that's not easy either.
Yeah, so Facebook also doing some new identity stuff at their F8 developer conference. They were talking about sort of a new motto for the company.
Yeah, so people are saying the mantra for Facebook for a long time was move fast and break things, and now Mark Zuckerberg put up in bold letters on the stage, move fast with stable infra. We've seen some things on Secret People being like, don't stop trying to make stable infra happen. It's not going to happen. But I think really overall, it's like, for a while, Facebook has been saying, like, we're not trying to be cool, we're trying to be electricity, we're trying to be a utility. And if Facebook didn't want to be cool, like, it nailed it with F8. There was no real consumer launches. It was really strictly for developers. They still did some cool stuff. I mean, they launched their new mobile ad network, which is going to just print money. But the anonymous login stuff is very interesting, too. So the idea is that it's not about, like, Facebook becoming secret or something like that. It's that you'll be able to log in anonymously to other people's mobile apps so that you can try them out before you give them your data. Because a lot of people are just like, I don't want to give my data to some random developer before I know if I even like this app or not. But that's how Facebook imagines it. But I'm really excited to see if people do build anonymous first style apps as opposed to just anonymous optional. So maybe there will be a sort of Facebook-based secret clone.
Wow, yeah, that sounds great.
But that does also just sort of potentially kind of make it sort of the onboarding process easier in the sense of, like, I think a lot of us have had the experience where you try out an app and it immediately asks for your Facebook permissions, and you're like, I don't even know if I like this app. I don't want to like give you all these permissions now, but maybe, you know, down the road I will be. And so to have you be able to try it out and then later on maybe, you know, give more permissions seems to make sense.
I mean, Facebook gets hated on a lot for privacy, and the one thing the dev conference really did was add a lot of new things that could help people with their privacy. So now when you log in to a mobile app, you get a checklist of each of the different data permissions that you want. So if you don't want to give them your email address but still want to use the app to, you know, suck in your likes so it knows what your interests are, you can do that. You can pick and choose. And there actually a big deal is that Facebook is not going to allow apps to pull in your friends' data anymore. It was always kind of weird that like I could log into an app and give them all my friends' data, like all of their you know, their interests and their, you know, and their status updates and all that stuff. It just seemed kind of invasive to like let any of my idiot friends do that.
Right. It was a good reason to unfriend people who were not smart about how they were using Facebook.
Right. It'll still be a few years because Facebook launched this new 2-year core API guarantee where they're not going to screw with the APIs because they know that developers hated when they were constantly changing things and pulling the rug out from under them right as they finally got something launched. So it's not going to happen just yet. You're still going to be able to have apps pulling in your friends' data for a while, but it's nice to see Facebook trying to move in that direction generally.
Yeah, so nothing too flashy from F8, but some good stuff on privacy, which is always good news.
But what was the feeling like, sort of, I'm just curious, like, since this is like one of the first times I wasn't there physically, what was the feeling just sort of on the ground? Were people still really pumped about like sort of developing for Facebook?
I think people were definitely still pumped, but more in the way that like, this is a stable business for adults to make money on, opposed to like, this is this exciting new social adventure.
Right.
And that was sort of the overall feeling on the floor. You know, the keynote from Mark Zuckerberg and Ilya Sutskever, it lacked a lot of the emotion and pizzazz that the one a few years ago did when Chris Cox demoed Timeline showing his whole life and his family and how everything came together. It was full of photos and pictures of cute pets and things like that. And this was all like APIs, these are the numbers. So, you know, Facebook's trying to be a mature company, and I guess you can't fault them for that at this age after being 10 years old, but, you know, it's just it's nothing to get us fired up about anymore.
Right. Well, I've also never seen Chris Cox give a speech that wasn't emotional in some way.
Yeah. But so Twitter, also another company that's trying to grow up and move to the next stage, just had its quarterly earnings report this week and some lackluster reception on Wall Street.
Yeah, they like you said, you know, they're trading at an all-time low. I mean, so they're still above their IPO price, but at an all-time low. And it's interesting. It's both this quarter and last quarter. You know, the financials actually are pretty solid and are coming in at least a bit ahead of what analysts expected, but the user growth numbers still aren't where people want them to be.
Right, and it seems like all of the growth, even the revenue growth, is the growth curve isn't as steep as it used to be. It seems to be evening out a bit.
And I think that the thing about, like, you know, a consumer social network like Facebook or Twitter, I think people just really expect them to really just be much bigger than I think Twitter is right now. So like right now it's like, okay, well, if it kind of plateaus, that's an interesting kind of, you know, like decent sized business, but that's not kind of the huge kind of, you know, industry defining business that maybe people thought it was going to be.
I always hear these two separate things. I hear people say that Twitter is this massive thing, but then I also hear people say that it's really only journalists and media people who get excited about Twitter and really use Twitter. It's for either if you're in the media or you're a celebrity or something, then Twitter's great for you.
Yeah, I think Twitter's big issue right now is figuring out how to make it so that new users who sign up actually have a good experience. And there's this one fundamental problem in that the early days of Twitter, if you joined, everyone was looking for more people to follow, so you quickly gained followers and gained this audience, so it felt like it was important for you to tweet. Now, everyone sort of hit their bandwidth. Because it's an unfiltered feed, you can only follow so many people before you lose track of like your close friends, and because of that, nobody wants to follow anyone new, so it's hard to build an audience, and then you just sort of feel like you're talking into the void. And so now you've seen, even though their growth rate went from what was 3.9% last quarter to 5.8% this quarter, you know, and that's better than Facebook's 4% growth in the last quarter. You know, Twitter's still under 300 million users.
Right,
and
it's around 250 million.
Right, and Facebook's at 1.28 billion users. And so, you would hope that at a smaller size with less saturation, they would have more room to grow and they'd be growing faster. So I think they're really gonna have to look at how do they do the onboarding experience, how do they build the feed to make it work for new users and not just the hardcore journalists and celebrities and people that have been on it for years.
Can't we just have something that's self-sustaining and kind of nice, although I guess Twitter is not self-sustaining, it's not profitable, but that serves its core market and does a great job? I mean, Twitter is clearly not going anywhere. Nobody's going to just give up on Twitter in the near future. But maybe it's not going to be something that everybody in the world uses. Why does everything have to be either, your Walmart or your McDonald's or you're going out of business? Can't something just be somewhere in the middle with a nice niche?
Right, but then, I think you don't sort of take money from, as a public company from a bunch of investors who assume that you're going to be sort of on this, big growth trajectory.
Yeah, it seems like that's sort of what Foursquare did too. Why can't Foursquare just be a great check-in app with badges and stuff? And maybe it could have been if it didn't take on tens of millions of dollars.
I mean, that's just not the way the venture capital industry works.
Right.
Like, they want home runs, not base hits. And so,
Right.
while I think Twitter is a magical service when you use it right, the ability to distill knowledge into these little bite-sized nuggets so you can learn so much so quickly from really smart people. It's amazing when it works right, but it's, conveying that value to the general public is turning out to be a lot harder than people think. It's not just like, oh, you get to see photos from your friends like Facebook where it's obvious why you would want it.
Right, and I mean, this is maybe going a little bit sort of afield, but I think it sort of gets to this point of I think now you start to talk to more companies now that there's definitely this excitement about just raising VC funding, but I think there are a lot of companies now that aren't sort of traditional VC funded companies that realize, oh, actually this is not the I don't want to be the guy who has to have this crazy growth trajectory. I want to be able to just build a business that I kind of believe in, and so maybe I don't need to raise the $10 million or $20 million.
Gotcha.
But everyone's worried that winter is coming and that it's suddenly going to become really hard to raise money or IPO, so people are stockpiling these
I think you're seeing a lot of
$250 million rounds right now, and it's like, well, yeah, you better grow, because if you raise $250 million, you don't have much choice or people are going to be pissed.
People are going to be really pissed. Well,
and
cool.
on that note.
On that note, that's about all the time we have for this week. Make sure you tune into our Disrupt conference over the next
if you want to
few
see
days.
people get pissed, we're going to be asking some hard questions on stage. And I know that people are kind of sick of the word disrupt, but we almost invented it. We didn't invent it, but we really popularized it. So we feel like we get a pass when we say that word. But yeah, I know it's become a catch-all term for anybody who thinks they're innovating.
Now we can be the post-ironic usage of disrupt. We can just recapture.
Disrupt.
Right. We can take the word back. Thanks for watching. We will not be having a Crunch Week next week. We're taking a week off, and so we'll see you the week after in San Francisco.